Minister Anthony Albanese and Opposition Leader Peter Dutton have exchanged barbs over the upcoming referendum on an Indigenous voice to Parliament. Joining us live now, Shadow Veterans Affairs Minister Barnaby Joyce. Barnaby, good to see you. Thanks for your time this morning. So, Garma this weekend, is Peter Dutton missing a trick by not going?
Look, I don't think so. The voice has turned into the invoice, hasn't it? We've been now finding out about the treaty and the implicit costs of that to all Australians and to what it means to private ownership of land. And we've seen an example of that in Western Australia, where dig down 50 centimetres, you need a cultural officer. That means every post hole, you're going to need a cultural officer. Put in a pool in a house bigger than 1,100 square metres, you're going to need a cultural officer. Dig yourself in a sewage system, you need a cultural officer. People are starting to get very, very concerned about where all this is off to. And I don't think Garma is going to make a difference to the lack of details that we currently have. Legislation for the voice that's not been tabled. I mean, where do you want to meet your partner, your bride, your husband? Do you want to meet them as you walk into the church, at the altar of the church, or on the way out? Because that's where you're going to meet the legislation for the voice, on the way out after the referendum. Pretty sneaky, don't you think?
The government has accused the opposition of scare tactics over the question of the voice. The Prime Minister, though, we've seen it a few times now, he's tying himself in knots not to answer those questions on the treaty. But why does that matter so much if, as Dean Parkin has said this week, a treaty would take years to process?
Yeah, well, so do a lot of inflictions in life take a long time before you see them, don't they? I mean, just because it takes years doesn't make it right, and doesn't mean you don't have a right to know beforehand. It's just so sneaky, and they have tied themselves in knots. And Minister Burney, to be frank, she's really struggling. And the Prime Minister is also, I tell you, there's three people who are probably watching this very intently. That'd be Jim Chalmers, Tanya Plibersek and Bill Shorten, because if this goes down after the Prime Minister has invested so much into it, he'll have to ask himself the question, should he resign? Like with the failure of the Brexit referendum, it really is a question of judgment, and he's not helping himself because he's trying this abusive lack of detail and trying to guilt trip Australia into voting for something that they haven't actually seen the detail of.
He's already said that he's not going to set a date at Garma this weekend. It feels like the theatre there would set the scene for something like that, but do you think he should change his mind?
Well, it's up to him. He's going up there for theatre, and just the expression, to Peter Dutton, you've got to get out of the dirt unit and onto the red dirt. I mean, these are all emotive statements by a person who's in a corner and scratching, and not actually dealing with it in a statesmanlike way and saying, okay, you've got a fair question. You need to know the detail. Here's the legislation. There it is, tabled. And then actually listen to things saying, well, this will never get past the Australian people in its current form. Let's be honest, Mr Albanese. This is not going well. That's be the most polite thing you could say about it. Not going well. And if you want a referendum to get up, then you should engage in a truly bipartisan way and a realistic form as to what the Australian people will vote for. They want recognition, but all this other stuff stapled to it, reference to the executive, on every section of the executive, a lack of detail on exactly what the voice is. The fact that it's a racial clause that will be inserted into the Constitution, where I can't be part of the voice, you can't be part of the voice. If you're Chinese, you can't be part of the voice. If you're Indian, you can't be part of the voice. This is not something we deal with in 2023. All that stuff is in the past. We've moved on from the differentiation of people and the colour of your skin.